But I'd love to see a show of hands here, and I'm going to ask for sort of a show of hands for two groups. One is who is already involved in implementing, starting up a program of high-impact tutoring in a district here, who's already sort of embroiled in this work, and who is starting up? So who is someone who is thinking about dipping their toe maybe in the water of high-impact tutoring and is wondering for looking for advice on how to get started? Great. Thank you very much. It's going to help as I think about what questions to ask our very, very illustrious panel here. So welcome panel, and thank you, Commissioner Schwinn, for your inspiring and very substantive speech to kick us off for the day. It's often hard, I think, to hit that combination of inspiration and also very tactical advice, and so we'll hope to continue that tradition here. I'd like to give each of the panelists a little bit of time to explain the scale of their program, how they got started. I have some follow-up questions. I'm very curious about learning what kinds of implementation challenges they've experienced and then how they've problem solved around them, the how, not the if. As Commissioner Schwinn mentioned, and then we're going to open it up to all of you. So if you have questions, please write them down. There'll be an opportunity for a passed mic as well. Before we get started, I'd love to ground us in why we're here today in terms of high-impact tutoring and its definition. So as Commissioner Schwinn mentioned, when we think about high-impact tutoring, we're not talking about homework help, we're not talking about ad hoc, opt-in kind of engagement, but we are talking about dedicated time during the school day to be able to provide students with the opportunity to consistently meet with a tutor who is trained and sometimes paid in a way that they are practicing problems in a particular discipline in a way that they start to make progress and feel efficacious. And so that's very different, I think, than the way that we've thought of tutoring in the past. And one thing that I want to ask each of our panelists is how they've brought this definition to their own contexts. In particular, I'd like to focus on two challenges that we've seen in our own work in standing up tutoring initiatives and trying to do studies to understand what works for which kids around the country. And that is around finding time in the school day and the staffing. So Commissioner Schwinn touched on both of these, but I think that those are two of the hardest things to do in education, figuring out time during the school day and who is going to do the instruction, in addition to the how of the curriculum and the timing. And those are the kinds of questions that I'd like to focus our conversation on today. So Bernard, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us a little about the scale of tutoring in Denver Public Schools, but in particular from the district perspective, I'd love to hear about how you got started. So you hear about tutoring, what makes you interested? What are the first steps that you start to take to stand up the program? And then to describe the program a little bit too would be great.
So in Denver Public Schools, what was really attractive to us is figuring out ways of making sure our children could access their brilliance. And high-impact tutoring was one of the ideas that we thought could help us get there. Now, I'm going to give a lot of credit to Whitney Miller, who's sitting right up front, who was our first director of extended academic learning. And Whitney is the person about 2 years ago who started us on this path of high-impact tutoring and outcomes-based contracting. And so I do believe that they go hand in hand, and it's for a reason. The scale for us is we have over a couple of thousand students and growing who are doing high-impact tutoring. But as a school district, and I guess we'll talk about this a little while later, we have to not only do things that are successful, but we actually have to be able to document that. So I'm really glad that we have researchers here in the audience and who are a part of this. And so you have to document it through research, and you got to have great data. And so as tutoring companies were coming to us, because it's something that we wanted to do, I wanted to make sure, and we wanted to make sure that they believed in themselves as much as they were trying to convince us to believe in them. And so when you put together a contract that talks about not services, but outcomes, then that is something that, as an entity, you actually can stand behind, and as different funding sources go away, we should fund for outcomes. And so that is something that we have done, and so that's just a little bit about it. And did you want challenges, or you want challenges later?
I'm going to ask you about challenges now later, but as a follow-up question to that, can you talk a little bit about where the money came from? So you have this idea, you've got outcomes-based contracting. How do you pull together the funding? What kinds of funding sources do you look towards to pull together?
So there were some general fund dollars, but the majority of the money for this came or still comes from ESSER funding. And so we as a district look at ESSER as the opportunity to try new things and pilot some things to see if they're successful. Now, we do our research and we're making good bets on things, but as a school district, and one of the things that the commissioner said that I totally agree with is, hey, we get the opportunity every year to invest in what's most impactful. And so whether there's ESSER funding or even when it goes away, we invest in the things that are most impactful for our students. And because of the data and the outcomes-based contracting and really, really hard work by students and by tutors, we have data that says this is successful. And so ESSER funding doesn't have to be there for us as a district to invest in what's most impactful for students.
Thank you. I'd actually like to touch on the tutor piece for just a minute. So I'm going to skip over, Christy, to you. Can you talk a little bit about the Illinois Tutoring Initiative and the scale and scope of your work there, but specifically focused on sourcing tutors, and staffing is a pain point and a challenge we've heard a lot of people mention.
Sure. So Illinois made a great decision a couple years ago, and that was that our ESSERS funds roll through our Board of Higher Education. So our deputy director is here with us today, and we decided as a state in Illinois that we should leverage our higher institution, our institutions of higher education. So that is the entirety of how our program runs. So I at Illinois State run the central office where we have centralized hubs for all of those things. Data, research, training, those sorts of things are centralized. But then we leverage partners throughout the state. So we have 7 different institutions of higher education that each cover one geographic region of our state. And then in that region, and we've got one of our regional partners here with us as well, so if you get the chance to meet Chate Green today, I would highly advise it. So these regions go and they work specifically in close relationship with the districts in their geographical region. So it really resonated with me when Commissioner Schwinn talked about how everything is different from one corner of Tennessee to another. It's very much like that in Illinois as well. And so our institutions of higher education know those district partners and their regions very well. And that is how they partner very closely to find a tutor pool. So yes, we utilize teacher candidates in some of our institutions. The districts in our region, for example, that are close to campus will utilize teacher candidates as tutors. But those that are in rural districts 2 hours from campus, we really utilize local community members, former teachers, current teachers, and paraprofessionals as our tutor pool.
Thank you. And how many tutors do you have as part of the initiative?
Thank you. You know I brought a Post-it note. It's the only way that I can function. I will give you my numbers. Right now, we are in 59 districts. We have 138 schools. We have 750 tutors that are tutoring 977 assignments for over 2,000 students a week.
Thank you. So we're going to get to challenges in a minute in the problem solving, but Adeola, I do want to hear from you because Reading Partners has been a widespread model even prior to the pandemic, and then you've talked a little bit about how you've had to change your model because of the sort of post-pandemic world that we're in. So can you talk about scaling your initiative in this current environment with ESSER dollars coming through and districts really trying to scale up high-dosage tutoring?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me through this? Yeah? Okay, good. Good. Thank you, Christy. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to take a look at my notes because I want to make sure I get to everything in the amount of time that you're asking us to. So first and foremost, Reading Partners is a national organization. We specifically work in the early literacy space. We recruit, we train, and we support AmeriCorps members who coordinate our community-based volunteer-led tutoring. So essentially, we mobilize volunteers like all of you. I'm a volunteer at Reading Partners, and I know many of you volunteer in the communities that you serve. We're in 12 regions across the country, and our objective is to provide students in under-resourced schools with proven individualized reading support that they need to get to grade level by 4th grade. So as such, we work with elementary school students who have experienced significant opportunity gaps to educational inequities, and these are categorized by students who are at least half a grade level, or 6 months, to 2.5 grade levels behind their current grade level reading proficiency. And our program uses an approach of customized by grade level. So for children who are in kindergarten through 2nd grade, we help students focus on developing mastery of key foundational literacy skills, and then kids 3rd through 4th grade, we help them further develop the complex reading skills necessary to be on track for grade level reading proficiency. So right now, this school year, we're working with over 6,000 students across the country, and that's about 8,000 tutors. So our tutors work with our students either 1 hour a week. So for someone like me who is running the organization and traveling across the country every single week, at least in the month of May, it's almost impossible for me to tutor twice a week. But the student that I tutor, a 3rd grader named Natasha in the Bronx, New York, I live in New Jersey. I tutor a student in New York City. She gets tutored on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so I'm with her every Thursday, regardless of where I am in the country. So that's just an example of how we work with students. And then you asked just about how we made some shifts during the pandemic, so I can talk a little bit about that too. So we know, I think everybody in this room doing the work that we do, we know that inequities are only amplified during times of crisis. So I'm sure we can all relate if we're in education or research or higher ed to where we found ourselves in 2020 when everything was closed. And many of us were home, and we had to find ways to ensure that we were centering the needs of young people. And at Reading Partners, the way that we did that, over 90% of the kids that we serve are Black and brown, Black, Hispanic, Latino, young children, and many of the students that we serve are experiencing economic disadvantages, and even more during the time of the pandemic. And so we adapted our curriculum to be a program online. So in response to the pandemic, we rapidly pivoted our in-school community volunteer model to one that was solely online called Reading Partners Connects. We are still using it. And in fact, last year, so we have both an in-person model and an online model. The first year of the pandemic, 99% of the kids we were serving were all online. Last year was about 50%. This year's about 30%. And while the pandemic was no less challenging for Reading Partners than it was for any of you in this room or other organizations and institutions of higher ed and researchers across the country, it definitely accelerated the progress we were able to make in terms of developing an online tutoring program, which has allowed us to keep our costs down to be able to expand. So in the past, in order for us to be in a new community, we had to build an office and hire an executive director and hire somebody to do fundraising and community engagement and program. And we've been able to keep those costs down through Reading Partners Connects by not expanding to operate direct service in new places, but instead using Reading Partners Connects to virtually connect with families, communities, districts across the country.
Thank you so much. And Karina, I actually want to stay on this point of online tutoring because you are the virtual tutoring coordinator at Ector County Public Schools. And so I want to hear a little bit about how you came into the role and started up this virtual tutoring program and what it looks like now.
Yes, good morning. So I'm from Ector County ISD, which is in Odessa, Texas. And what started this was during the pandemic, we offered all the students a device. Everybody had access to one-on-one device. But during that time, we realized that not every student had access to Wi-Fi. So the next step was we started offering free Wi-Fi to every student in Odessa, Texas, so they were able to access their teacher. Another piece is once we came back from the pandemic, of course, everyone had gaps, big gaps. And we needed to offer them tutoring. So Odessa, Texas, and Midland, Texas is a big oil city. Our economy thrives on the oil. We lose teachers, police officers, and even students to the economy, to the oil, because they pay so well. So when students came back, we were short with teachers, short with students. Students didn't come back. We knew we had to offer virtual tutoring in order to get the students back to where they were. So that second piece was virtual tutoring. We knew that they would be able to access tutoring regardless of location or circumstance. They had their device, they had Wi-Fi. So we started with the virtual tutoring, and another piece that came into play was the outcome-based contracting, which incentivized the tutors for that academic growth in the students. The tutors work harder because they're held accountable for student growth. So we started that at 42 schools in Odessa, Texas, and students have their device. They're able to access a tutor pretty much any time during the day. And then really the final piece is, like Commissioner Schwinn mentioned, is that communication piece between the tutor and the teacher and the parent and the principal and everyone. That just kind of bonds all those pieces together to really give that student, you know, the best high quality tutoring that they can receive.
Can I ask a follow-up question there? So how do you do that? How do you make sure that the teacher, the tutor, and the parents are all sort of in communication?
Well, at first I was the middleman, and I kind of was between the tutoring company, and then I would tell the principal, and then I would tell the parent. And of course, that got to be a lot. So I started making connections between the tutor vendors and the teachers, how they can communicate with each other. And they've kind of taken it on their own to have parent contact information, contact the parents when they're doing great. If they miss a session, they are able to contact them directly, and that's just working great.
Thank you. Thanks each of you for sharing a little bit about the scope and scale of your programs. I do want to think a little bit about challenges that you faced and how you've solved these problems. And so if you'll humor me, maybe if each of you can describe when you were getting started or even a current challenge that you are facing and how you're thinking about problem solving there. We'll start with you, Bernard.
Yeah, so one of the challenges when a district adopts anything or even a school is to making sure you have the proper communication and collaboration so that everybody is involved. And so that is that you're not doing something to schools or teachers in their classrooms or to students, and you're not doing something for them, because that's pejorative, but you're doing something with them. And so as we rolled this out, that was one of the key things that we wanted to do, and it's helped as we rolled it out. And I do have to give say it helps that the companies who you work with, that they are very collaborative and communicative as well. And so two of the companies that we work with who've had tremendous outcomes with this are Signition and Tutor by Teachers, and they're both here today. So I wanted to mention that, because when you have the communication, collaboration, and the buy-in, it just becomes almost seamless. I went to visit some of the classrooms that were doing this, and usually principals will assign an assistant principal or somebody else to oversee a project. But the principal was so involved because she saw the impact that it had on her students, and she just really talked about the fact that it's because of the communication she had with the company. And the thing that opened my eyes the most is that I talk to students. What do you think about this class? Because we were doing it during school time. Have you been tutored before? Have you been tutored in person? How do you like this online? And would you do this again? And I got affirmative responses from all the students. And they weren't coached on this because, you know, third graders will tell you the truth. And so I think the communication is something that can be a challenge, but it's real easy to solve for if you're making sure that you're working and collaborating with people, and it's not just a top-down approach.
Thanks. And is there a stakeholder that you wouldn't have anticipated needing to engage at the beginning of this, that in hindsight, or along the way, you said, oh, actually, I'm really glad they were at the table?
Yeah, so I would say this, so everybody's a stakeholder. And so I would say for us, I'm not sure we knew that we needed to engage our board as heavily. Now, this was a good thing from a board perspective because they actually heard how impactful that the tutoring had been from some of their schools, and they wanted to know more. And so that was something that we did on the back end that we could have done on the front end that might have just given more credibility and buy-in for what we were doing. But there is that tension around the fact that board members do policy, and not all the time do you want them to cross the line into day-to-day operations. So that's the one stakeholder.
Thanks. Carina, what about you?
One obstacle that comes to mind is teacher buy-in. When students returned to campus, teachers were like, you know, these kids are behind. You want me to give up more time? It was hard for them to let the students start the virtual tutoring and carve that time during the day for them to get online and receive this extra tutoring. But once it started and the teachers saw the quality of the instruction and knew that they had a part in, okay, they sent the curriculum over, I want you to work on these TEKs specifically to that student, it was very differentiated. Then they started seeing that it was having an impact on their students. So I think what happened was word of mouth. This teacher said, okay, you need to check this virtual tutoring, it's actually working, the kids are liking it. The students love it, they're able to connect with someone that's their own teacher at that time of the day. If no one else on campus calls their name that day, the virtual tutor does. They have a good connection with their teacher, and it gives them that SEL moment during the day that sometimes some students don't have the opportunity. So it's really teacher buy-in, and once they saw that impact, they were ready to get the students started. It's grown, so we've gone from high-impact tutoring to accelerated learning, where we get other students to receive enrichment and help them grow as well.
And when during the school day? How did you find time during the school day?
So that is up to every campus. Every campus is unique. So some campuses have an intervention time built in during the day, and everyone at 9:30 can have virtual tutoring, whether they're identified as needing the tutoring or if it's accelerated learning. Others, they just have different times that maybe during an elective or during PE time or some other time during the day that they're able just to carve that time, they can find sometime during the day that that student is able to get on their device and receive the tutoring. So it's really unique to every campus and every student.
Thanks.
And if I may real quick, one thing that I really like is that students, we have some that they're absent all the time, but sometimes students, when they're home and they're absent, they actually get on during their scheduled session. And we know that they're attending at home, and that's good to hear. Yeah.
Thank you. That is actually really remarkable. Adeola, can you share a little bit about an obstacle and how you problem solve?
Yeah, Carina, I'm thinking about the last thing that you just said. I think that truly shows how impactful not only the SEL portion of what the tutoring provides, but how beneficial it is for a student where if they're not even coming to school, but they're getting online. And I'll start where Bernard, where you left off. You know, I love how you shared what you shared about doing work with communities, not to them or for them. One of my colleagues, our managing director of national partnership, Jen Joyce, is at table 13. She's amazing, and you should try and talk to her at some point about some of our curriculum and what we're doing, but something she and I talk about every single week, along with many other people throughout our organization, is we ask ourselves the question, how are we doing this work with communities, not to them or for them? And I think I sit in the seat of a national nonprofit organization, and I think sometimes it's really easy to think you know what a community needs, and I think far too often, organizations go into communities because they have funding and they look at data and they say this community needs us, but they never communicate with the community to ensure that's what they need, right? Like they're already enriched with so many resources, and what can we do to merge what it is that we have? We don't purport to be the panacea. And so on that note, I think what we've learned, and one of our biggest challenges, and we're still learning at Monica, is about partnerships. Prior to the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of work we were doing with families. You know, I'm embarrassed to say, but it's very true. We were not doing a lot of work with families. Our program was primarily during the school day, and so all of our communications, the stakeholders we were most engaged with was whomever the literacy lead or specialist was in the school, the teachers, and the principals. All of those people extraordinarily important, but so are the families. And if we're with their children twice a week, and there are tutors who are coming into the building, working with that child and building a relationship, how can we engage? So the pandemic was a great disaster in a way for us because it allowed for us to be in our families' homes virtually. And to be able to say, this is who we are, and we got to learn about their children in a different way, we got to engage, and so we've extended that now into our traditional program, so that when we're getting, for example, family permission slips signed for children to do the program, we're also saying, and please come into the reading center, or if you're working during the day and you cannot, what are ways that we can engage with you and share with you what your student is doing in our program, and here are some resources of things you can do at home, and what is it that you're looking for, and how can we kind of mesh what you'd like for your child and the ways that you want to provide support for them outside of school to the resources that we have. So that's been profound for us. Still very far to go, but I think just a challenge and one that we've learned a great deal about.
Thank you so much. And can I ask a follow-up question there, which is, given that a lot of the reading partners, tutors are volunteers, how do you ensure that kind of tutor feedback to make sure that your tutors are able to be responsive to the families as well, if that's part of their expectation?
Yeah, so we do a few different things. We've embedded into our curriculum, so at every level, depending whether or not you're in kindergarten or you're in fourth grade and you're a struggling reader, we have embedded not only phonics and comprehension and fluency and other literacy skills, but also social and emotional, or SEL, as Carina was saying, SEL lessons. So in addition to a young child learning the letters, the sounds of the letters, and putting those letters together to make words, we talk to them about confidence and what it means, and drawing on their experiences at home. Every tutor is responsible for taking notes after those lessons, and we communicate with our families how students are progressing through our program, not just through the data and the progress that they're making, but also some of the anecdotal feedback that we're getting through our SEL lessons. And so, you know, I think some of the anecdotal feedback we've heard from families as a result of doing that, it's like, oh wow, oh, you know how much my son loves basketball, and how if you talk about basketball, or you're introducing him a book that you're introducing a book to him that talks about basketball, he's actually going to light up and he'll be more excited about reading. So those are some of the things we do.
Thank you so much. Christy, same question to you.
Yeah, so I'm a bit more in the weeds in my notes. Sorry, guys. The truth is that there are a lot of scabbed knees and bruises in this work. And so I went a little more in the weeds on my comments here, but we had several pain points. I'm not gonna like sugarcoat this, guys. It's hard work. And so we really approached it through systematized, centralized systems because there's a lot of schools, and we say it all the time. We say about our initiative, there are 59 districts and 59 stories. There are 138 schools and 138 stories. So we really try to really huddle. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but like huddle, not handshake, right? And so we are firm believers in huddling and having those in that context tell us how to solve these problems. And so we've solved some pretty big problems around CBCs. I mean, can I hear you? Do you guys have CBC problems? Because we did. Like figuring out how you do that. How do you get CBCs for every single district, for every single place that your tutors go? Now keep in mind, we're face-to-face for every single one of these tutoring sessions, 3 times a week for thousands of sessions a week. So we really need our people to be CBC checked. So that was something where we were, so we had to come up with a system. So we centralized that system. We also had to really think on the front end, and thank God I have a team of 8 research fellows on this initiative, where we thought from the very front end about data, about how are we gonna collect data and how are we gonna make sure that we are implementing high impact tutoring with fidelity. So thank God for our friends at NSSA and Kathy, who takes my calls at weird times, because we had to design this program around everything that research told us about high impact tutoring. So all of our tutors at the end of every single session go through a checklist to make sure that they are implementing high impact tutoring with fidelity. And then our team members, Shatay Green, who is here, they go out and they supervise all of these tutors and make sure that what they're saying they're doing for fidelity is actually what's happening. And when it's not, let's just use that word correctly, when it's not, then we coach them. And you coach them in the moment, in the context where they live. And so those were kind of our biggest things: data, background checks, and fidelity.
Thank you. I don't think that's too in the weeds at all. I imagine that this audience has had similar challenges, and I see a lot of head nods as well. I actually wanted to stay with the theme of participation. A lot of the motivation and the interest around high dosage tutoring or high impact tutoring has been because, we finally have this intervention that seems to work across geography, across age, across subjects. To accelerate student learning. And if we're going to be really serious about addressing some of these long-standing disparities in education, we need a way for some kids to learn more than others and to target it so that the kids who might need it most or might benefit most are getting it. I would love to hear from each of you in your context how you think about that targeting piece. How do you think about which schools, which kids, and then monitoring whether or not that's actually happening? And in case it's not too much of a follow-up question, how do you think about the sort of small a accountability of making sure that if it's not happening, how can you sort of course correct to make sure, like, the quote-unquote right kids or right schools are getting the resource, in lieu of what often happens in education, which is a resource gets adulterated, or you start to sort of spread the peanut butter a little bit more thinly across a larger population of students.
Yeah, so
It can be a free-for-all. You're sitting next to me, so you don't have to be the first one.
so for us, we actually get weekly reports, not only from our partners, but we also do a weekly analysis in-house with our research team that talks about demographics, but also make sure that we are reaching, it's kind of hard for me to say the right kids. I think all kids are the right kids, but the students that match our demographics and the students who need acceleration. And so we look at that on a weekly basis, that we get a report, and then once a month we actually sit down with a group of stakeholders, including that research team, to do analysis of where we are and where we want to go. So I think it is really, really important that you look at the data and are always in a continuous improvement cycle, so that you don't wait to the end to say yay or ugh. And so that's, we have a lot more yays in Denver, but that's how we do it.
Well, just like teacher buy-in, one thing is we need student buy-in as well. And one thing that I found very powerful was the conversation, that initial conversation with the student that you have about where they are, where they need to be, and having them commit to the tutoring. So we had those powerful conversations, even data conversations with our students, letting them know what the tutoring was, when it was going to happen, and how important it was. Once the students realized that it was helping them and they were reaching those milestones they needed to, they were all for it.
Yeah, we have a value at Reading Partners that says data drives decisions. And I think we know two things are true. When we're matched with students who are 6 months to 2.5 grade levels behind in reading, and when we're following our curriculum with fidelity, and we're getting students into our program twice a week, every week, and we're going through the lessons based on where students are assessed, and we create a scope and sequence for them, we help them make progress. But when we're not doing that, or if we're doing that and it's not working, there may be another intervention that's better for them. So I think just really making sure what we call at Reading Partners progress monitoring is key. We think about success in two different ways, not just our reach, how many students we're able to serve, but the impact. And it's not good enough to just serve a ton of kids if they're not making the type of impact. So I love what you said, Bernard, about doing so weekly. We also have a cadence to how we're looking at progress and making sure and looking at historical data to say if we're able to, if there's a student who hasn't come twice a week, every week, what is it that we can do? How can we really call upon the village to make sure we're getting that student in here? And if we can't, and there's another intervention, as I said before, let's think about whether or not that intervention is better for them.
That's great. Man, what a great group of people up here. Whoop. Okay, so about how you pick kids in our initiative is our state really thought from the front end, and our governor, I meet with a lot of people that are very important. State agency people, right? I really probably shouldn't sit at that table, but our governor's office and our state board of higher education and our state board of ed, those are the people that I get to meet with every week. And they were very thoughtful 2 years ago when they met with our P20 council, and our state committed to high impact tutoring as one of the 4 things that we would do in Illinois. And so those agencies came together very thoughtfully and said, man, millions of dollars sounds like a lot of money, but it's going to go away pretty quick. And so we need to be very thoughtful in how we decide who we are going to fund through this initiative. So some of our districts use their ESSERS funding directly to do their own high-impact tutoring through the support of NSSA. Our state also helps to provide technical assistance for districts that decide to do this work themselves. And those districts that decide to come through our institution-led, those were districts selected through a formula of different metrics about making sure that our state was providing this opportunity for districts that were under-resourced and most impacted by the pandemic. So we really decided that in this initiative, we can't be all things to all people. We can't spread our peanut butter too thin. And instead that we're trying to focus on the districts that really didn't have the resources to do this themselves. And then the districts themselves, I believe, should be the decision makers in terms of what students should be being referred for tutoring. And so we're not going in there and telling them, I've got your answer. We're instead saying, you make that decision. So we see that the stories are very different. Some of our districts are only picking students who are far behind, and some of our districts are saying, man, this kid's really on the bubble, and if we could just give him 3 hours a week, he's gonna be able to pass that AP test. And so they're making those decisions, which I can sleep with at night. It feels really good.
And if I could just add one other thing. So visiting the schools or classrooms is another way that we actually do that, because it's one thing for me to see it in black and white or on a PowerPoint, but when I go into a school, when I go into a classroom, I can not only see it, but you can feel it if it's working, and then data can confirm that for me.
Thank you. So I have one more question and then would love to turn it to the audience, which is that we are unbelievably closing out this school year very soon, shortly, and looking towards the next school year. And so I'm wondering, in each of your contexts, as you've moved from, you've launched these initiatives, they are well on their way. What are you focused on? What's the problem of practice or your sort of focus area in terms of implementation and improvement for the coming school year? And just for variety, maybe we'll start at the end with Christy.
See what she did there? Thank you. So we are very excited. We are launched. We're feeling, bruised and battered, but excited and hopeful all at the same time. And so we are always in, I love it, Bernard, you said continuous improvement. We're constantly in a cycle of looking at what we're doing, what's working well, what's not working well, and where do we need to go next. And we look at two places to make those decisions. We talk to our partners, our regional institutions of higher education who are doing this work every day to tell us what's working well, what's not working well, and what do we need to do systemically as well as locally to try to address those issues, as well as talking with our district partners. And so there are several things, guys, right? We need to continue to make sure that students attend. We had several of our schools at the very beginning that thought that adjacent time periods would be great. That was all they could figure out, right? Because they had to solve a problem quickly. So they all went, well, we have this after-school program, let's do that. And then pretty quickly they realized attendance was an issue. And so now they're all in redesign, and we just sit along with them and redesign to help them discover these periods during their day that they can implement this, that we know will lead to higher and greater outcomes.
And the question, Monica, was what are we doing, or what are we looking forward to in the future? Is that the question? Okay, great. Okay, good.
Sorry.
No,
My
your answer was great,
my
and I
answer
was
did
like,
not help
what
her.
was the question? No, because it was so robust. So I'm excited about a few things. So first of all, our online curriculum that we use, Reading Partners Connects, is getting a refresh. We've partnered with Amazon Web Services, and we're launching our new curriculum that will be ready this fall, which is going to be more interactive and will allow us to actually expand our reach to serve even more students. So we're very, very excited about that. We also think a lot about not only what I consider like Engine 1, our core model and program, which we've been doing for 25 years, which researchers like MDRC has shown that it works. We're also really excited about transformative bets. What is research also showing, in addition to high impact or high dosage tutoring, also helps support children, like summer programming, and not to make progress, but rather to help mitigate any further slide or the summer slide. How can we support young children over the summer? So that's something that we've been talking a lot about, and we're excited in some of our current districts and looking to even expand that into other places. And then last but not least, we think a lot about efficacy, and we're just excited about what we can do to deepen the impact that we're having with the students we're currently working, and just ways that we're constantly trying to improve upon our curriculum to ensure that we're doing the very best for every young person we get the privilege of serving.
I'm excited that we are offering this tutoring more to middle school and high schoolers. Those have been the tough schools to really reach the students. It's been hard to incorporate into the master schedule some time that the students can use the virtual tutoring. We did pilot one middle school this year where there was an intervention time built in during the day, and it seemed to work well. So we're going to scale that model to other schools and high schools, and hopefully have better attendance in those areas. And like Christy mentioned, we've had scrapes and bruises along the way also, and after school tutoring is not working. We know that students need to receive this tutoring during the day. So I'm excited about really tweaking the schedules in middle schools and high schools and reaching all the students and have that tutoring accessible to all.
Yeah, and I am excited because we've come to a point, because of the outcomes that we've had, that the coalition of the willing, of principals and schools who want this is growing. And so we'll have more schools that are participating in the fall because their colleagues have told them how impactful it's been in their building. And so I'm looking forward to that. And then the pressure for it, because a lot of this is funded by ESSER. So if I get more schools to do it and they have greater outcomes, you can never take away anything that's good. So I'm looking for the pressure from them to say this is something that we absolutely have to have because it is great for our students.
Thank you so much. And now it's your turn. So I'm off the hook a little bit. If you have any pressing questions, we have folks walking around with some microphones. Just raise your hand, and we'll be sure to get you one so everyone can hear your question.
Hi, Monica. Alan Saffron from Saga. I'm particularly interested in Ector County, Carina. You are about to expand the remote live instruction into the school day. You've piloted it in a middle school. What's your strategy to overcome the skepticism left over from COVID by teachers and parents that remote instruction didn't work?
We do have data from the school that we conducted the pilot at, and we've seen a year and a half's worth growth in many students, in about 50% of those students. So of course the data is going to speak for itself, for one. But second, we have invited some of the other middle schools to come and do site visits and see what's going on so that they can, we can have that teacher buy-in early. So they have come over to the one middle school that has a pilot. They've asked lots of questions, great questions, and we hope that we're able to tweak that model that we're currently using so it fits in the other schools.
And one thing that we've been talking about in some of our work is that the pandemic was the very extreme version of educational and technology, where that was your only salve, that was your only outlet, and that's clearly a recipe for burnout. And so one thing we talk a lot about is whether we can have strategic use of educational technology, whether it's via platform or online learning, and how are ways, not whether all the way yes or all the way no, but how are ways that we can incorporate it so that you're sort of maximizing the potential of your human capital and then also the technology. And so that strategy, Carina, really seems to resonate with that question as well. Over here. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. So my question was sort of circling back to the conversation about barriers. Can you sort of discuss sort of like what barriers you had with regards to documenting your success and how that can be used to translate into policy? I know that I just completed my fellowship with the Department of Education, so one thing that we were looking at is just sort of how can people do, not necessarily a better job, but how can we improve the language of like the document so that people know where to document their successes so it actually translates to federal data. So can you just sort of speak to like where is there a disconnect in that language?
Okay, I'm gonna jump on it. So lots of people in this room know me, so I'm gonna say one thing that's very important for you, madam. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so you absolutely have to prepare and think about what data you're going to need before you need it, like long before you need it. And granted, I've got weird experiences in my life, but you've got to know kind of what the timing looks like too, right? So you've got to understand the policy time frame in order to collect your data so that you have it to make those strong statements. Because there are probably people in this room, I've been in that situation many times, where I'm about 6 months too late with my data, and you can't be there, right? So we're fortunate, we have a great partner and a platform that helps us collect and keep all of our data together so that we can look at growth over time. And it just so happened that we planned that accurately, where we knew that we need to have our outcomes ready and able to present across all the stakeholder groups so that then it can translate into policy recommendations or requests for more funding as it be. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Hi, I'm a Brent-Scale computer science professor here at Stanford. One thing I wanted to ask about is how important is continual professional development for the tutors, and how much cost does that incur in the programs in order to make sure the program's delivered at the fidelity that's needed?
Sounds like a good question for Adeola.
Yeah, I'm looking at Jen for how much it costs, but what I'll share is that, because I think, I'm just thinking of a lot of different costs that indirectly or directly tie to a tutor's professional development. So our AmeriCorps members are the people who run the reading centers, and they do a lot of the ongoing training and coaching with the tutors in real time during their sessions with students. And then before anyone can become a tutor, there's an online orientation or in-person orientation that we do. And then we offer several different opportunities for tutoring professional development and coaching for people who are tutoring children who are K through 2 on some skills that might be different for children who are 3 through 4. It's all embedded in our program. So we have program managers who work with Jen and her team to ultimately ensure that they are passing through all of that training the trainer, training the people who are in our reading centers. So Jen, I don't know, I'm like looking at you to think about what that cost is. I don't know, but after I get off stage, I can find that out for you. I can talk to Jen, and I just won't take up more time at this panel because I think we're almost at the end, but I can find that out for you, how much it costs. How much the additional professional development costs.
And I know for us, we do core training for all of our tutors, similar to you. So we have, I guess now it's up to 8 hours of core training that all of our tutors have to complete and pass at an 80% accuracy level or higher on the assessment of those core modules. And then after that, that's when our regional coordinators become so important, because then they say, to your point, well, now you're no longer tutoring 3rd grade reading. Now you're gonna do 7th grade math. So now we have some content modules that we also need you to view and to take. And so we really rely on the supervisor, similar to you, to decide what they might need more work in. And then we just utilized our faculty and staff at the College of Education to really develop modules on an as-needed basis for what are we seeing as gaps in our tutors.
And then maybe just you just made me remember something else too. We are here for each other. That's what it takes a village, right? It's just that there's ongoing real-time training. So anytime a tutor is tutoring a student, there is a staff member, a AmeriCorps member in the physical reading center, coaching them. All of the lessons that they're doing are all scripted. So, I mean, essentially everything that they're saying, there's been efficacy in our curriculum and what it is that they're trained on, or even like the social and emotional learning skills. We're not saying, talk to them about confidence. We're saying, say this. So it's very regimented in that way, which does two things. I think it helps someone who may not have a degree in education or may not have kids who have struggled with reading or have been in a classroom regularly, like just humans who want to make a difference. It helps those people also be great at tutoring because there's ongoing support and there's real-time support and there's a script. So they're not just saying whatever or doing whatever they want to do. And that's why I said it's so hard for me to then tell you how much because professional development is embedded into everything that we do, if that makes sense. I wasn't trying to skirt the question as a CEO, like, I don't know. I just really mean it's so embedded into so much of what we do.
We've got a question back here.
Thank you. Good morning, Charlotte Horton-Williams from the Commit Partnership in Dallas. And we are not a tutoring provider, nor a district, nor a state agency, but we work alongside or kind of in the middle of all of those types of organizations to help districts operationalize tutoring. And the question that I have, and I'm going to ask you to go back to Dr. Schwinn's comments earlier, her really, really powerful call to action for everyone to get involved in tutoring, because unlike Tennessee, Texas is facing a fiscal cliff. And we're also right now very vendor heavy in terms of delivering tutoring to students. And as we think about the next few years, like how do we start to balance the really, really expensive vendor model versus engaging other folks in tutoring. One of the challenges that prospective tutors have run up against, the everyday people like us in the room, are just accessibility to schools. Like, how do I get in a school to actually not help kids with homework, but really, really engage in and support high impact tutoring? So I would love to hear from each of your perspectives, or whoever cares to share, like, what are some of the readiness factors that districts and schools need to be thinking about, and then also recommendations for embracing people who want to come into the tutoring space that may not be affiliated with an organization or a vendor.
Yeah, so I'll start with this one. So we are actually opening up how we recruit people for things in school time, but actually out of school time as well. And so we're actually aligning so that we can get more people. We're aligning what happens in school with out of school, so we can have more opportunities for people to be a part of what we're doing with students in an impactful way at a time that fits for them. The other thing is that Angelin Thompson, who is our director for extended academic learning, is launching a program this fall where we're actually using, now this is in district staff, but paraprofessionals to actually do some tutoring, and that be the gateway or part of their journey as they become teachers in the district. And so that has been, we have like 600 people who are interested in that as we kick that off.
For our district, I'm thinking about the cost and the outcomes that they've provided. And this coming school year, we've had, a very costly vendor that's given us the same outcomes as some of our other vendors. So I know that this coming year, we're going to have to kind of look at the data again and look at the cost and see just that cost benefit of each of the vendors, so that we can decide which contracts to move forward with at each of the campuses. There's data, but there's also qualitative things that we need to look at as far as the tutoring. So again, this coming year, we're really going to look at the data and then just decide which contracts to move forward with, which is, hard decisions to make, but that's what's best for our students.
Yeah, I said before, as someone running a nonprofit and oftentimes a vendor in districts, I'm not a district representative, I'm not a superintendent, so I can't speak from that lens. But what I'll share, I guess, are two things. One, I think while one of the aspects of our model that has worked well, that doesn't mean that everybody needs our model, but rather maybe we can be an example for other organizations or other districts and different communities, is that we have tutors who are in high school, and I think it was actually Denver, I'm looking at you, Jen, that we piloted 8th graders. We had some 8th graders actually in Denver Public Schools tutoring our students, and we got great outcomes from the young people, whether they were 8th grade or high school students. So because we train everyone the same, and the expectation is that you know how to read, you love kids, we could pass the background check and all of that, but that you can do the training, it actually then opens up the floodgates for who can be a tutor for us. So that's something that we have seen. But yeah, so I'm only speaking from my lens. That doesn't fully answer your question, but that's just the way that we think about how we do it. I was going to say one other thing I said too, and I can't remember. I'll pass it to you.
I just love you. I just love her. So I think Illinois approached this a little bit differently, and part of how we did that was honestly through compensation. So we made an assumption 2 years ago that $20 or $30 an hour was going to be enough to recruit people. But when Taco Bell starts your 17-year-old at $18 an hour, all of a sudden $20 and $30 wasn't enough for us to recruit the tutor pool that we needed. And also, I mean, I love these volunteers that y'all are finding, but guys, in 2023, it's hard to find volunteers. Everybody's tired, to Dr. Schwinn's point. Everybody's tired. And so what we did is we really viewed the Illinois Tutoring Initiative as a win-win-win. It's a win for kids, yes, 100%, right? It's a win for our tutors. It really is, because some of our tutors are in low-income communities all across our state, and it is providing great compensation for them in a part-time job that they can work when they can work it. And it's a win for our communities, because some of our rural, very low-income communities in Illinois don't have employment opportunities. And so we really view it as kind of a win-win-win, in that we approached this issue of recruitment and getting people to re-enter schools through compensation first. Then they fell back in love with being with kids, and then it spreads. And so that was kind of our approach.
Thank you to each of you. I think we are at time, so please join me in thanking our panelists.